For much of the year, the global aviation industry and the news cycle has been dominated by the current ongoing coronavirus pandemic. Even more, we've seen some of the travel restrictions in place by countries restricting international arrivals, which prior to the pandemic were lucrative markets for airlines. In Southeast Asia, we've seen some of the highest restrictions in place for travel during the spring and summer when the cases of coronavirus infections picked up. Since the spring and summer, one nation, the island nation of Singapore, is now setting its sights to reopen its borders for international travel. Compared to the countries of Southeast Asia, Singapore is a city-state with no major domestic network for its airlines to take advantage of right now. As a result, the heavy restrictions on international travel have placed the hometown airline Singapore Airlines in a state where it requires some financial assistance, with plans to operate just around 15% of its operating capacity pre-coronavirus levels before the year's end. Along with affecting the airline operations in Singapore, the entry and travel restrictions in place since March of this year has also heavily impacted Singapore as a regional aviation hub. This was highlighted recently by the Singapore Transport Minister Ong Ye Kung's recent remarks to the Singapore Parliament, which he stated the Changi Airport is now just serving 1.5% of its usual passenger volume and 17% of the total number of flights that would normally operate at what is considered the best airport in the world. With things reaching a critical state, Singapore has developed some schemes as part of efforts to reopen its borders as part of a boost to jumpstart its aviation industry. Like many of its international counterparts, Singapore was not actually closing its borders 100%, as the bare-bones schedules were operated mostly for repatriation and cargo flights. The first step the island nation took was to reopen the airport for limited transit travel during the early parts of June. While it was a start, there were some restrictions including the routes and destinations that would be available for connections, as well as measures that the airport would take, including transit passengers from those departing from Singapore. While the reopening for transit travel has helped to an extent, given the controls in some countries, Singapore has moved to reopen entry for select countries with varying degrees of quarantine measures. One move was to target the reopening of travel for business and essential travel through what the Singapore government calls the Reciprocal Green Lane Agreements, or RGL for short. This would allow for short-term, essential, and business travel provided that there is a government sponsorship through Singapore or the participating government. While the mandatory home quarantine requirement would be waived, travelers would still have to apply online through the immigration agency of Singapore or the arriving country and get a negative result for a coronavirus test within 72 hours before departure. To date, Singapore has agreements for the RGL with 6 countries, with Indonesia being the most recent. Other countries included in this program include the neighboring Malaysia, Brunei, China, South Korea, and Japan. The other program that Singapore is undertaking is a air travel pass for short-term visitors. Travelers from eligible countries would also have the quarantine restrictions waived provided that they get a negative coronavirus test upon arrival in Singapore, and they have not traveled outside the origin country within the last 14 days. However, unlike the RGL, it only applies for arrivals, as for departing passengers or residents from Singapore, they will be subject to the quarantine measures taken by the country of arrival. As of now, there are 4 countries that are eligible, including Australia except the state of Victoria, Vietnam, Brunei, and New Zealand. Both the RGL and the Air Travel Pass do have some restrictions, but with the ideal situation of people being freely to move around, Singapore is reportedly taking steps in that direction with the announcement of a travel bubble agreement with Hong Kong. According to reports, this travel bubble between the two Asian financial hubs would allow travelers to take no test or quarantine, though there will be special flights dedicated for these passengers, which will likely not include transit travelers from other parts of the world. These programs are part of a gradual plan to reopen the borders of Singapore to the world. Though there are big and warranted public health concerns, the prolonged travel restrictions have placed heavy burdens on the aviation industry. Ultimately, there is an importance, especially in the case of Singapore, to maintain its role as a business hub for the region, which has been a major factor in the success of the Singapore Airlines Group as well as Jetstar with their Singapore-based budget subsidiary Jetstar Asia. It seems Singapore is seeing that it is imperative to reopen for international travel as much as possible. I definitely hope you enjoyed this video. If you liked it, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Once again, this is Flights in Asia, highlighting the news and updates from the aviation and travel scene in the Asia Pacific. If you like this video, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Once again, thanks again for watching and have a great day.